in India, foreign universities can offer MOOCs, but Indian universities can't. So I think, of course, there's a lot to be done in these two spaces, but there is one area which I particularly feel that until and unless we fix that, fourth industrial revolution can't even be a reality, in the sense it will exist, but organizations will not be able to take advantage of it until unless India breaks away from the shackles of the archaic regulatory regime, which is the labor laws. I mean, no matter what we talk about technology, a lot of organizations can't grow and expand until unless they are given an ecosystem where, from a regulatory perspective, they have an even playing game. Right now, the informal sector in India is so large because they don't have to follow any laws. For the simple reason because there are too many laws. So while government is focusing on the 4 labor codes, there is one particular reform which has impact in today's discussion is, just like we have Aadhaar for individuals in India, it's high time there is a unique enterprise number for each and every organization, and I'll explain why. For any organization to operate in India, you need to have 25 or more unique identity or registration. Under different acts, some of them are part of central acts, some of them are state-specific. What consequences it has? We were talking about artificial intelligence, like you were talking about real estate. India's biggest problem is in our inability to have relevant data. We expect government to do something about the skills of the future, but we do not have the information architecture right now available to be intelligent about the decision making for the future. Now, if there is a unique enterprise number, and for argument's sake, I personally believe that the PAN number should be the unique enterprise number, and you should not be chasing governments for any other registration besides that one, the information architecture that gets created, which everybody can leverage in terms of decision making, corporates as well as government, policy making perspective will completely change if they have access to these real-time movements that are happening, which right now are hidden behind silos. PF is one thought world, financial taxation is another infrastructure. So I think there is no convergence right now which is happening in the information. And that is where we are missing out on an opportunity to the future. So I think if there is one thing which can have impact and make this an advantage, it's going to be adoption of a unique enterprise number for this country.
Just to add to Parna, only under labor law, there are 18 acts are there we have to follow. And none of the acts tax each other.
Let me add to your nightmare. There are 44 labor laws which are central and 100 which are state-specific just in labor laws.
We care for our labor.
They don't talk each other.
That's why we have made it.
Okay. Yeah. So
no, I want to welcome Sushma to the table, but we'll just allow you to settle down a little bit, catch your breath, and just get a sense of the discussion before I come to you.
So I have 2 points to add from my industry as well. One is, the basic question I would ask is, how many of us can have paperless offices, right? The third revolution, industrial revolution, was on digitization, right? And even that, what does that mean? That means going online. So one thing we have been trying to do is do a paperless office. But I was just curious to know, do any of you have paperless offices? We've been trying to get paperless, but it's not possible because of various reasons. Some is audit reasons, some is regulatory purposes, and that is, we're still stuck in the third revolution. So to me, we're still stuck by and large, because one of the most basic things is, why can't everything go online? I know we're getting there, but I'm saying we're still between third and fourth, we're not completely in fourth. The second part is more specific to our industry, which is, say, real estate. I'm sure most of you have had exposure to the industry because of whatever home buying. You might want to buy a home or office, etc. So the 2 biggest issues in real estate is probably on-time delivery, because most developers do delay the project. And the second is leakages and seepages in the industry. Almost every apartment, every building has a leakage or a seepage issue. Now, for both problems, there are solutions. Today, there is technology. So today, suppose if I take, say, 30 months to build a large apartment complex, there is technology to build it in 15 months. Okay? There is technology in India also to build it in 15 months. But when you run your costing of how expensive it's going to be, even taking the time value of money, it is still a much more expensive solution today. So if I can build a building at 100 rupees, taking time value of money of 10% of my capital cost, whatever it is, even if that's 120 rupees, the cost of building it in half the time, for me to adopt that technology will still be 170 rupees. So why would a developer go for that, even because the major saving in time is the capital that you save. Right. So like I said, that technology is available to build in half the time, but nobody's going, I mean, people are looking at it for certain projects right now. It's still in exploratory stages, but it hasn't been widely adopted because it's still the more expensive solution. Secondly, for leakage and seepage, if you ask me, there are nanotech sprays where if you spray the building, your entire leakage and seepage will, your building will stop leaking, leaking basically. But
be expensive.
It is too expensive to use. So the other part is the adoption of technology is, the cost is kind of prohibitive at the moment. So while there are solutions, like I was saying, it's probably restricted to a very small percentage of people, or it's still in exploratory stages. Like this nanotech spray might be used by like government authorities, or like to seal up certain high security buildings, but it's not yet distilled down to the masses yet. So I'm saying that these technologies are all available, but by the time it seeps down into the more developed countries, then it will come down to the developing countries, and then by it seeps down to the entire masses, it's still some time away, I would say.
Anand?
I think what this government has done is to build multiple narratives across several industries, whether it's digital India, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's cleaner India, or a more assertive India with respect to how we stood against China and things like that. So multiple narratives have been set into motion. So that's something in a short span of time that those narratives have been set into motion. That's what's getting business leaders to talk about this and do their own things in that particular space. And I think that you need to give the devil its due. I think that's where we've done really well. Again, coming to what could be better, I mean, taking our own industry as an example, I think archaic laws. Let me give you a couple of examples. Time immemorial, right from Indus Valley civilization, people love living right next to water. Water properties on water's edge are the most premium. But here, if there is a canal in your property, in another country, you say, hooray, there's a canal in my property, and my property is premium, and that those properties will sell well. Here, you can't touch the canal. You have to be 150 feet away from the canal, virtually making that land unusable. You say you trust the private sector, you want the private sector to invest in the growth, but I mean, walk the talk. Let the private sector spruce up that canal. You have to leave it unsilted, weeds growing. You can't touch it. You won't let us invest in it to make it look good. So I mean, things like these. Another piece of example is affordable housing, right? Direct taxes. Forget indirect taxes. Direct taxes contribute close to about 22% of any home purchase. Okay, which means what comes to the developer is $100, but what the consumer pays is 122 rupees. That's only direct tax. Indirect taxes is a separate matter altogether. Okay, let the rich pay. Okay, you have an affordable housing narrative. Can I reduce taxes for affordable housing? Now I know that we all play this tightrope walk. If I let that revenue go, where's the revenue going to come? Here we are sitting on a billion square foot of built space. Why can't you do capital account convertibility and invite foreigners to buy this real estate, which is built. There's no speculation there because it's a built inventory. It releases capital for developers like us. Charge that foreign capital that come in stamp duty and maybe a premium on the stamp duty, like say the Singapore government does or the Australian government does. Capital is freely flowing into real estate. Use that stamp duty money that you earn to make affordable housing, more affordable. It can't be made affordable only by us.
Of course, that is on the real estate side, the more bigger challenge. Let us come again now to, the technology providers, the telecommunication providers. Yeah. What is your view on what is the government and what we as a country are doing right, That is the question, Sushma, just so you can reflect on it.
Yeah.
You know, what are we as a country doing right in terms of getting towards a technology intensive situation, and what are we not doing right?
Yeah, a couple of points on this. We spoke of how we can take the technology to the people, right? So, and we also spoke of saying that pushing it to the people might not be the right strategy, because are the people or the wider mass capable to take this new technology? So, one thought is that to get to that level, to get to a advanced level of revolution where we can actually get the newer technologies to the wider mass of people, we will have to create that market or reach these technologies to the wider spectrum of populations. We spoke of 25% staying in cities and 75% staying in villages. So we need to create an environment how the technologies can be taken to the remaining 75% who are not living in the cities. And can we push the envelope and push it to the people? It is, I would say it's more not, we should not take it like a, do we need to push it to the people? I would rather word it saying that, can we make it available for the people? Can we make it available at an affordable rate? For example, when we looked at, we leapfrogging some of the technologies and going directly to a mobile phone rather than a computer, etc. How did that happen? That happened primarily because mobile phones were made available to a wider segment of population at an affordable price point. And the use case for, and they were able to be absorbed by those people with at a level of intellect, even for a illiterate segment of population or a semi-literate segment of population. So we will have to think in that direction in terms of how we can take these enabling technologies, whether it is the smart devices or connected devices, or whether we are talking of much more in terms of artificial intelligence, etc. How can we take these enabling technologies to the people in which it can be absorbed? Obviously, there has to be a parallel track in trying to upskill these people in terms of literacy, what is spoke of in terms of education, in terms of, so that has to go parallel on a parallel track. And but so this is the direction I think which we will need to think of as technology enablers, as product companies which are going to bring that product which are relevant to the Indian population. So that's the direction I think we will have to look at how we can take it.
Rajit?
Yeah, if you see that as a technology enabler, two areas where we are working closely with the government, B2G. One is the smart cities. I think smart cities are coming, and we are seeing that operating centers are getting built in between the cities, and they are actually addressing the basic administration of the municipality. And here, well, what we are seeing that they are taking care of that pollution control, they are taking care of the signals, they are talking about taking care of that CCTVs. It gives us a pleasure to see that we are associated the way the government is seeing the scale and the speed. I think it's humongous. Number two, if I see that the fiber network which government is trying to build for that panchayat to panchayat, which I have mentioned earlier also, I think this is another area, that BharatNet or BharatMala, which is the two project which is being governed by the government of India. I think here also the way we are seeing the scale, the speed, although we talk that government has red tape regimes and all other things, but here I think it's phenomenal the way the government is pushing private players to do that act and complete the act within the timeline. Yes, of course, private players has to play a pivotal role in a lot of areas. And problem with private players is that we always go for the profitable areas where we feel that we can get the quick money. And government is insisting me.
But that is a natural inclination.
That's a natural inclination. Government is insisting players to go to this USO fund, go and use those USO fund and get the basic infrastructure for the rural areas. And which probably now, because of the disruption made by Jio, incumbent operators are looking into. I am seeing that people are reaching to Northeast, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, where there was a basic voice availability was there. Now they are getting 4G connections from straight away from that basic connections to the 4G connections. Okay. These are all happening because now technology is pushing these private players also to be there.
So technology is spreading its tentacles, as it were, right? Vikrant, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the table have
Sort of agrees on that.
Kind of generated
What
the
are
voice
we
enough.
not doing right?
So I think I'll concur with a couple of points here as we are seeing while Dilip and Prashant and everybody covered it. One is this education versus literacy versus skill. Okay, so literacy versus education versus skills, because the numbers that get printed in the government charts is literacy numbers, not necessarily the education infrastructure. We are maybe building faster schools, but the creation of a skill is by good teachers rather than good schools. And that good teachers kind of a fabric relates to the economics in that education world or a motivation. Okay, of how. So how do you do that kind of a respect getting attached to some of these roles to be far higher than the other jobs. We seem to be in that archaic thinking where we were creating workers to work in a certain same fashion, and hence A for Apple has become, you can't even complete the question, the child will answer Apple. Answers Google will give tomorrow. It's the age of questions. So we need to actually have the next generation being able to come up with newer and newer questions to solve. And if you ask the same child how many words you can form with the letter A, he will give you 3. Just that we don't repeatedly ask him that question. So I think while the technology, etc., is assisting children and the next generation to be more smarter, to be able to ask the right question and not worry about the right answer. So on the education fabric per se, that kind of a change seeping into the teachers' development, the next level of education, like Times of India Group, the Teach India movement. Okay, how do we spread that and repeal the issues which are constraining pure research? Okay. Second, from the tech world, what came from Gaurav and some of the other people here, why don't we in India have the next WhatsApp or a Salesforce or a Google kind of a company coming out of India? If we divide the population into creators and consumers, a lot of creators are working for the foreigners. Okay, amongst a lot of us. Okay. The pure research piece, which is happening the next 30 years and the next 50 years kind of a dimension. I had a privilege of listening to one of our futurologists. So Salesforce has a board of people who come from a gentleman by the name Peter Schwartz, a 70-year-old gentleman, actually has authored 7 books, and 2 of his scripts got converted into movies. So Minority Report, science fiction, was on his script.
Scary.
So the guy is a NASA scientist, one of the original Stanford Research Lab kind of pedigree, and we asked him to speak about AI ML kind of dimension, and his first point was, man thought that we will study brain, put it on a chip, and leverage it. The US government and is running a project to actually know 1 centimeter square of a brain, and that project is not complete and is not likely to be complete. So it's because it's a post facto exercise. You had something manufactured by nature and you started studying it and reverse. So all of this whole hypothesis of we will study human brain and make machine human-like and be cognitive is not going to happen. But if you do it reverse of saying, we do AI as an assist service, all those experiments have been successful. So if you have a technology assisting a human brain, the outcome is compounded effect. Okay, versus, so whether it's Google Home or Assist or Maps or drivers or anywhere we are having AI assisting us, it's a compounded effect. And wherever we thought we will, so AR versus VR, okay, virtual reality versus augmented reality. So I think augmented reality is where it's more tuned to nature. Coming back to the education piece of infrastructure, and second is the product building infrastructure of, whether it's laws or why did Flipkart had to register in Singapore for the first place, and why did why did they go and went to Singapore to register themselves in Singapore entity, and then somebody else funded it, and a complex funding structure, and over a period of time, even part of that first generation entrepreneur outcome for the country is perhaps 2-3 billion out of the 16 billion. Okay, so I think if we were to next create Indian created IPs staying in terms of impact global, but at the same time engineering local, both the education infrastructure and the laws and forward-looking instruments of being able to, so if they just facilitated funding through a little more creative routes than archaic paper, perhaps those bright engineers wouldn't have sourced funding that way. The idea has not gone anywhere. In fact, a pretty big brand found meat in that idea. So, but the outcome is in the country, maybe a fraction of state. So I think.
Where are you registered, Prakash?
So we have a private limited company in India, but our holding company is in Singapore.
Oh.
And we have merged with a company which is held in Mauritius.
In fact, yeah. So that's to the same thing. We work with e-commerce companies. To your Ritu's point of multiple enterprise numbers. One of the problem that we are solving with Paytm, for example, or a Snapdeal, is vendor onboarding. So you have on Paytm Mall so many vendors coming up and selling their stuff. That digital onboarding is a company-to-company onboarding. You have a TIN number and GST number and so on and so on. That process was like a couple of weeks. Converting into a couple of days has been a humongous win. But why can't it be just like a B2C process, that a geo fingerprint and a SIM is active in an hour? Okay, why can't that be digital handshake between the two enterprises while the backend infrastructure is, by the way, ready? You have numbers in place, you have databases in place, technology can facilitate it. It's about the political will to make that marriage happen. If we're solving it for some of the private sector, if we start solving it institutionally, technology is not the barrier. The barrier is willingness to do. So I think the Singapore or Paytm has a technology company registered in Canada, okay, and some of this will vanish if
These are as big challenges as what you said. So let us now come to Sushma. So what we have been discussing initially is basically about whether we thought the fourth industrial revolution is more of a challenge or more of an opportunity. So most people think it's more of an opportunity. Gaurav felt that there's more of a challenge because there are other issues, and of course there is a lot of opportunity as well, but there are challenges that we cannot ignore. We also spoke a lot about data and the fact that we do not have adequate data in certain industries, and how much we are going to be dependent on data for this revolution to take place properly. And then of course we had this round where we are talking about what are we as a nation doing right and wrong in terms of moving in the direction of becoming a technology intensive economy. So that's a lot of stuff to talk about, but let's have your views on these.
So let me sort of begin. First of all, sorry I was
Yeah.
sorry I was late, but I had the indulgence of Economic Times. Thank you very much. So here's how I think about the fourth industrial revolution. I think of it as an enabler. Okay? So you were talking about whether it's something that is deleterious, whether it's an opportunity, but I think it's a huge enabler. Enabler of what, right? It's an enabler of efficiency. Eventually, if you look at it, you can distill this industrial revolution as a pervasive end-to-end efficiency game. See, industrial revolution itself was a efficiency enhancer. But what's different about the fourth industrial revolution is it's end-to-end, it's pervasive. It pretty much touches every facet of whether you're a consumer. So if you look at it, and you've been hearing examples from education to housing, to telecommunications. So it's very pervasive. So it is not the act of introducing machine for one thing, but it is all about how you're enabling efficiency across end-to-end supply chain. Okay? I'll dwell more on it. The second dimension is about how you are enabling newer and newer experiences.
whether it is in education, whether it's in buying a house, whether it is in banking, ultimately it's about, or simply about, you know, how you order a taxi service today, or how you go to Swiggy and do your meal planning. Ultimately, it is about the experience of your meal waiting for you before you reach home. And I think this is a pervasive mechanism which is boundaryless. So to some extent, as a technology provider, I sort of wonder whether we should be in the process of wondering whether India will be ahead of the curve, right? As long as you have the right Indians globally across the world, how does it matter whether Redbus is you know, located in Singapore, as long as that service is offered in India? And today, every technology company is beating its door here because of our multi-billion population. Now, why can't we be astute enough to be able to take some of these innovations and make it work? Then the last piece of this whole thing is about, there was capital versus labor in the Industrial Revolution. This is about labor versus machine. Okay? So is it capital turning itself in terms of machine? So it's about the huge dichotomy, or not dichotomy, but the tussle between what will be done by labor, what will be done by machine. What will be done by machine in order to make sure you're getting the right efficiency and the right experience. These are my fundamental thoughts, okay, on what the fourth industrial revolution is. Now, how is it impacting, at least the sector that I am in, which is the technology sector, and specifically in the Indian technology sector, which was fundamentally propelled by the right labor talent, right? So at what pace are we going to give way to automation? Do we really have that choice? Or is that choice going to be dictated based on where we want to be in this entire broad global economy? I think these are the fundamental questions that, at least as a CEO of a company, that I'm grappling with. At what pace do you make it happen? At what pace do you spur entrepreneurship? At what pace do you have innovation ecosystem sprawl within the, you know? And to that extent, I think India, with the right kind of educational infrastructure, at least the higher end educational infrastructure, it's just a matter of time. And I am steeped in the, you know, startup world. I mean, he's an IITian, okay? How long did it take for him to, I don't know how long you worked. I don't think you worked too long in the industry before you went into the entrepreneurial. So I think the educational system fundamentally in India is going to pave the way to enable people to actually capitalize on the fourth industrial revolution. And technology companies are most certainly going to sort of aid and abut this, because in it lies their own existence.
But our education system doesn't seem to be supporting the kind of pace of change, like you said, you know, the pace of change of innovation and learning that is needed. So is there a different kind of framework that we need?
See, I think it's very easy to sort of bash something and say, education system doesn't work, okay? It's not a trivial problem.
Of course.
It's not a trivial problem. I think we just have to sit back and say, if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, business people, across all the economies in the world, how many of them are products of the Indian educational system? Quite a few of them. Quite a few of them, right? Mm-hmm. But I think herein, and I have a very philosophical view on this, and this philosophical view is that it is incumbent on each and every institution, every company, to be able to say, what can I set aside? And today we have CSR funds. Why shouldn't part of the CSR fund be diverted to creating the right educational infrastructure? I think ultimately we need to be able to drive the use of every dollar, every rupee in the system to be able to drive or enhance this change. So I wouldn't sit here and bash the educational system. On the other hand, I would say, what is it that we can do to actually have more IITs, more regional engineering colleges? How do you unearth the entrepreneurship? How do we actually build the ecosystem? People like, for instance, there are many non-profit organizations today. NASSCOM is one of them that is actually supporting this in a big way. How do you drive this entrepreneurial spirit? How do you drive the ecosystem of startups? How do you make sure that people have the ability to take that risk? This is not something that you just teach. You need to enable. Right. So I think there needs to be a hell of a lot of enablers in the system.
I think we're looking at a lot of enablers in this room right now.
I agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Of course, a lot of corporations, a lot of companies are also doing a lot in education. We all know some of the big names, and there are some not so big names who are also doing a lot of good work. I mean, Shiv Nadar's school and other schools run by big organizations are well known, but there are many others as well which are doing, and hopefully at some point we'll reach critical mass in that area as well, and things will change. But let us come to the, another part of the discussion now. We are about 20 minutes left. Let us now talk about your own organizations, and not necessarily what you're doing in your organizations. I mean, organizations like yours and yours, Prakash, have an advantage because you are digital businesses. Yours is a digital business. You are a provider of IT services in that sense. But initially, when I started off this discussion, I had spoken about how CEOs are probably not giving technology its due, have not given it the due so far. And gradually that is hopefully changing. I can see and sense the change, in the last 15 years that I've been doing stories and interacting with people. But within your organizations, basically, in the digital age, companies need to become digital companies as we go ahead, right? You have your business model, everything has to be driven by digital in some way or the other. But a study by McKinsey, for instance, said that even in the West, just 4% companies are actually totally digital companies. A lot of that, 40% or 50% of it, still have not started their journey, or they're just planning. So there is still a long way out even over there. And within our Indian system also, of course, the gap is much bigger. But I wanted to understand from you all, what is happening in your industries and in your organizations in terms of moving towards becoming a digital company? Are your boardrooms talking about technology when you meet to discuss specific agendas? Is digital among the top 3 agenda of your CEO? And if you are the CEO, is it on your top 3 agenda every Monday morning when you wake up? Where are we on that? Manish? Okay, Uday.
Yeah, of course, yes. Digitalization or technology is a top 3 agenda in our board as well. But we are very careful in which part. I'm not sure we will be talking about 100% digitalization. So the part of the delivery, part of the product, part of the technology, part of the process, part of the policies, a lot of things will be digital. But end customer, it should be based on their need. What they need is more important than, because when I said our customers are, what we said about $1,400 bracket of today, so we need to be extremely careful what they need to serve. To serve that, what makes us best way to serve, using the best platform of technology or our service mechanism. So that is the top priority for us, rather than converting the customer to digital mode. That is not the priority. That should be based on their demand and their need. Anytime they need, anytime they prefer, they want to move, we will be always ready for that to adopt for them. That is what. Otherwise, the delivery, the process, the product, the internal system, that is the priority to do it.
Manish?
So, as an organization, our promise to our clients, which is life science companies primarily, is that we help you build modern commercial and medical organizations. And modern over here means enabled by digital and AI, ML. Right? And we do that through a combination of domain expertise, essentially healthcare, medical expertise, and very significant technology expertise. We pretty much work with every big pharma company across the world. And it's interesting to see even the big pharma companies, and I'm talking about in developed markets, right? Our assessment is that probably 20-25% have taken a digital journey or embarked on a digital journey, right? Even in the most advanced ones are probably 25-30% into the journey, right? So even for companies in this space, and as I said, I'm talking about the developed world, there's a long way to go, right? And we came up with this whole thing, we called it digital maturity model. What does truly digital being mean, right? How are you impacting your customer? What messages are you giving them? How are you capturing data and using that data to optimize on the next interaction? And we believe that's a fairly long way to go. And technology is not the bottleneck over there, right? It's about existing structures, existing mindsets, processes, right? The old fragmented ways which need to be worked upon. But in a nutshell, I think there is still a long way to go for the industry itself.
Okay, who wants to? Okay, after.
Yeah, I think coming from a technology-based company, answer to your question is yes.
You're one of the rare exceptions where your name is there in the senior management team on the website of your organization. And I look at that across all organizations. And many organizations don't have the CIO or the CTO in the senior management team on their websites. It's very nice to see that.
So, thanks for that. So what I was mentioning is technology, digital, and the differentiation actually is a business strategy for us rather than looking at whether it comes in our top 3 or top 5 bucket. I think that this consumes the maximum number of discussions that we have even at a board level within our company or at a senior management level within our company. So when we look at what are we doing, and if I break it up into 2 parts, one which is consumer facing, one which is internal facing. When we look at consumer facing, we are looking at what used to be a internet connection some years back. Now is getting into a platform where you can deliver high-speed internet, you can deliver entertainment, where streaming services, different kinds of content availability, etc. And you can also deliver lifestyle in terms of connected homes, surveillance cameras which are connected, where you can, sitting in office, you can look at what's happening inside the home, etc. So all these are digitally evolved products that are being made available to consumers. So when I look at the consumer side of the things. When I look at the internal process side of things, saying that what are our internal processes to deliver these to the consumers as well as continue to service the consumers. So we have done huge amount of work internally in the last couple of years in this aspect too. You mentioned about paperless office, paperless processes, etc. A huge drive towards that, where today most of our processes internally have moved towards a mechanized or a zero-touch process with very least number of manual intervention. A consumer can come, he can request for a connection on the app or online, and the request directly flows to the systems, and systems will directly see whether that customer is already connected or not connected. So the entire workflow of allocate, and that work allocation goes to an engineer. So with a map, with a customer saying that, okay, this is the place that you have to go, and this is where the customer is there, and that the engineer directly goes there, and a message goes to also to the customer saying that such and such guy is going to come at such and such time. This is the photograph of that person. So we worked on these aspects in terms of the internal processes of how to deliver these services and maintain these services to the consumer. Some parts are still manual in nature because of the nature of the business or because of the nature in the evolution where we are. For example, we still have to pull a fiber or lay the fiber till the customer's house to give him connectivity. Probably a few years down the line, when every home in the country becomes connected, probably that manual effort will also go away, where we can just, through a click of a button, the service will get enabled to a consumer because the infrastructure is already laid. I think answer to your question is a huge amount of work is happening, has happened, and is in the process of happening. So we still have a roadmap in terms of getting better and better at trying to digitalize most of the operations. Has it caused any problems with respect to the number of people or any? We have not seen that we had to reduce our team size because we have digitally enabled it. Rather, what I would say is the same number of people are now doing more work, or they are.
I get the same feeling every day.
more work than what they used
I'm
to do.
doing more work for the same salary.
Okay, I think that's the direction the industry has moved.
Your view.
So again, like you said, we're brick and mortar, but we took the initiative to set up the world's maybe second or third real estate focused tech accelerator program. So what that does is we look at technology, disruptive technology. I'm not talking about e-commerce type companies, but we try to look at deep technology, where you're actually using maybe some patented technology or some new form of technology to see, and basically focused on real estate industry only, because that's the expertise we can bring in. So it could be like a drone company, but which has applicability to multiple industries, be it mining or whatever it is. But we look at it from a real estate perspective. So we launched this in maybe 2 years ago, and we've had quite a few companies. Every batch we get almost 100 applications. And the acceptance rate is only 5%. Because we take in some equity and all that, but we distill out all the e-commerce type players, and we look at only deep technology companies. And in the last three batches, we've had 18 companies accelerate. And as a company, we have adopted at least 60% of those 18 companies. So 60% of the solutions we have adopted within the company. And I'm saying in one project. I cannot say it's pervasive and I've adopted in one, so it's adopted in all 30 projects. But we were at least given a proof of concept. We've tried to adopt that technology within the organization. So our way of sort of grappling with all this change, and I would say we set up the initiative mainly to sort of understand what are the disruptions happening in the industry across the world. Because a lot of the startups, in whichever industry, they look at what is happening in the US and then try to see if it can be replicated in India, because they see success stories there, and that's what we've seen, whether it's replications of Airbnb or Uber or whatever it is, or WeWork. So we find that a lot of the startups are mirroring the success stories of the US in India. So for us, it helps us keep abreast of the various technologies across the globe. And because we're a real estate accelerator program, a lot of countries like Canada, Israel reach out to us and say, hey, let's do some knowledge sharing of the kind of technologies that are available in their country and ours. And a lot of those companies want to come into India as well. So that is how we try to keep abreast of this fast-paced changes in the industry. And like I said, adoption and having these technologies permeate through the entire organization is tough, but at least for us it helps us keep abreast, because like if you read books like Good to Great and all that, all those companies that were mentioned no longer exist. So we definitely don't want to be irrelevant. And kind of what Shushma was also saying, when we evaluate companies, we look at only technology as an enabler. Can these companies either help me increase my revenue, cut my cost, or improve my efficiency? These are the only three things that we look at. And so that's how we go about
That's a great start to using digital. Who wants to go next?
So I
I'll
think
come to you
just a little bit about team leads to set the context. I think our vision is putting India to work, and when we talk about work, we're talking about formal work. And we thought that if we can innovate right at the intersection of employment, employability, and education, we should be able to do that. So, and we have two kinds of consumers. One, of course, are the employers or the corporates, and the other is the job seeker who reaches out to us. And I mean, putting India to work is a huge ask, and given that 1 million people are joining the workforce every month, so there's a lot to be done. And when we're talking about scale of that nature, we felt, or we believe that digital strategy cannot be a distinct strategy. It has to be inbred into the overall strategy of how we go about doing our business. And hence, it should be that invisible operating system running, cutting across the organization to take care of the interest of these two consumers, which is the corporates and the job seekers. So from our perspective, what we're looking to do is right from the start where the onboarding process starts, can we look at smart onboarding mechanisms? 15 or more fields when a candidate joins a company are repetitively filled across multiple forms and documents. It's time consuming for the employers, it's a wastage for job seekers or candidate that's the least exciting job to do. Smart hiring, I mean, we were talking about the fact that, we're talking about 16,000, 15,000 jobs a month. Now, imagine if throughput is to hire 10 people, I have to go through 500 resumes. And is there a way I could also come up with a smart hiring solution where this process of database going through multiples of resumes can be shortened dramatically? And is there a way we can do that through a digital revolution around the hiring process? Third element is learning. There are kids out there who are graduates. 58% of the graduates are actually unemployable. Is there a way we can use learning technologies to kind of get them back into the workforce and make them employable? People who are already in the workforce and constantly face the challenge of redundancy, and they're deployed across our 2,000 odd customers, is there a way we could give tools and solutions which are gamified in nature by which on a multilingual environment they can use and be constantly upgrading based on the requirements that the company has? More importantly, my own workforce. We have most of the people, 80% of the people are doing jobs which are mundane, repetitive, predictable, which is time consuming, which involves paper, lots and lots of paper, which involves lots and lots of Excels. Is there a way we could actually do away with having a manpower intensive business focusing on data crunching and number crunching, rather release this bandwidth through technology and make them more sensitive to the customer's need, where they're spending more time talking to a customer or a candidate or counseling them? I think the future that we are seeing, we feel that through inbred digital strategy, we can actually look at, because the customer's aspirations are also changing. Customers no more wants hands and legs, he wants brains to come attached. And hence, we are saying that we're preparing ourselves to not putting India to work merely, putting India to productive work. And that's only going to be possible at scale if we don't have technology at every element of the business.
Great. I think, are we doing enough, or are we doing the right things in digital, in healthcare? Absolutely, yes. We have every year, there is a conference that happens in Chicago called RSNA. It's a radiology conference where a lot of people come there to display their technology, what's changing in the industry. And last year when it happened in December 2017, there were 35 software companies who came to display their technology in healthcare. And that was not the case before. And it was a wake-up call for many people who were not serious about digital, that there are people who do not know anything about clinical, who do not know anything about devices. There are people who are there to look at the data and make inferences on the health of the people and what needs to be the industry direction. So from that perspective, in our company, I think this is becoming a #1 priority. Two things are happening. One is affordability is becoming a bigger need in almost every region. We recently had a discussion with the government of India. They are talking about putting more than 1.2 lakh primary healthcare centers across India. Now, how do you create?
I think 150,000 was the number.
They were in fact talking about more than lakh. And the only possibility there is through technology. Only possibility is through telehealth. Only possibility is through creating systems that are going to provide lot more possibilities with lot less manpower. Today, there are 5.8 billion people across the world who do not have medical access. And how do you make medical or healthcare reach
That's
them?
almost the entire world population.
Entire world population, 5.8 billion. That is actually Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia. If you consider these, most of the people reside here. Wow. And for these people to reach healthcare, the only way possibility is through technology. And that is the biggest driver for everyone to look at the possibilities. The technology in terms of the devices is changing so fast, people cannot continue to buy the new equipment. For example, if someone wants to buy a MRI equipment, it will cost you anywhere between 3 to 5 crore rupees, a good MRI machine. Once you buy it, You're not going to change it after 2 years. And the technology in terms of the software or the intelligence piece is changing so fast there. People are saying, I can't afford to upgrade my system. So everything is moving towards cloud. Everything is moving towards auto upgradation of the technology. And people want to really get the return on their investment. People want to really serve more people. There was one doctor who was talking about every day he scans about 50 to 60 ultrasound scans. And he charges 200 rupees for every scan. And a very good ultrasound machine costs about 70 lakh rupees. And his only point was, I want to buy a machine which is going to give me productivity, zero downtime. And if you are able to give me that with integrating all the data that needs to be managed in one go, including reporting of every scan I do to the government, because there is a legal requirement.
Yeah.
So if you do that, I go with you. So technology is no more becoming an option. It is becoming a mandatory need for people to upgrade. And from that perspective, I think not just my company, even other healthcare companies, I'll be surprised if anyone is not thinking of digital.
I think Sushma, yeah, Prakash, you want?
Yeah.
I'll come to Sushma after you.
Two points. So while we are a digital organization, we are a platform business, and there is one aspect of the sellers that sell on our platform, they are not digital, right?
Yeah.
So we do some work in terms of enabling digital adoption amongst the sellers. So it began with first digitizing their inventory and helping them with distribution. Over time, we've given them tools to make their businesses being run more efficiently, right from giving them data on what are consumers preferring, ratings and reviews, where do they need to improve their service, analytics on which routes do they need to put the buses on, where are we seeing demand, where can they increase price, putting GPS on their buses and then telling them giving them overspeeding reports of drivers, delay points for them. And now with all the demand data that we are accumulating on our channels and being able to crunch that, we are now giving them pricing engines in order to make yield management happen for them. Right? So what we have seen is that even companies who are as small as that, SMEs and MSMEs are kind of adapting to digital. And the guys who have grown with us over the last few years are people who adopted to these changes far more rapidly. So today we see that the traditional bus operators are moving away, and when the second generation are coming in, typically, invariably, they happen to be, taking on the family business, but they're all engineering graduates for some reason, right? And they all have a far greater affinity towards what is happening, and we can see a lot of adoption happening there. Coming to our own business, while we are digital, the thing is that there are no the IP or the assets that we have nothing physical, right? So we don't have land banks, we don't have the kind of machines. So that also makes us prone to disruption far more. So there I tend to take inspiration from what Jeff Bezos says, that you can't predict what is going to happen in the future. So there's absolutely no point focusing on things that are going to change, because you don't know what is going to change. But what you should be doing is to focus on things that are not going to change, right? So in the context of that, if you look at customers for us, customers obviously want convenience of booking, they want like great choice and selection, they want awesome pricing, and they want reliable service, right? And on the supplier end, they want a higher occupancy and yield. So as long as we are focused on solving for these needs and just using technology as an enabler, using different kinds of technology to help people realize some of these things. For example, when mobile came in, it gave us an opportunity to not just become a ticket booking engine, not just remain a bus ticketing engine, but to become a travel companion. So we enable the travel experience by telling people, navigating them to the boarding points, because in India, bus travel is completely informal. People board buses on the roadside. So navigating people to the boarding point, telling them where the bus is, the real-time location of the bus, giving them a wake-up call before their boarding point location is going to come. So a lot of these things, and then from a disruption standpoint, like 3-4 years ago, we were quite conscious about ride sharing becoming very disruptive to bus itself. So if people started to put up, if I'm going to Chennai over the weekend, and I start offering 4 seats on my car for other people to ride with me, that dramatically brings down the cost for people, right? And that can disrupt the bus industry totally. And there are models like BlaBlaCar that works in Europe.
It's in India also.
BlaBla is of course in India too. So to kind of take them on, rather than worrying about it, we launched something called Ride. It was a completely standalone app, but Ride was premised on the same platform of ride sharing. So we saw traction, it didn't take off. So we also know that, so we learn by experience, learn by doing it, quickly do some POCs, learn from it. So for example, the next big thing that's going to happen in our space is blockchain. Essentially, we grew by disintermediating the traditional agents. But if blockchain comes in, that becomes a way in which a lot of my suppliers can absolutely start connecting to a decentralized blockchain and running their distribution through that without relying on a platform like us.
Right.
Now, how do we participate in that, right? What do we think about? So those are the kind of things that we grapple with.
Yeah, I think we have run out of time, but Sushma, I said I'll come to you, so we'll end with you. Because you are essentially, ITC Infotech is a provider of technology solutions. You have been having conversations with companies just like Vikrant and his team would be having. Do you observe a change in terms of the importance that the top management of the boardroom gives to digital and to technology? You must have seen several years of observation you will have within you. How do you see this? Is there a change that you see in terms of the attitude? Is there more intuitiveness about technology in the boardroom?
A very interesting question. So yes, absolutely. I have seen a marked change in the last 3 years in my customers across all fields, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's consumer goods, whether it's banking. From actually really dismissing things like digital and data to today saying, well, I am getting disrupted. So one of the biggest things that sort of keeps me awake at night, now all businesses are prone to competition, but the speed at which competition is coming at you, the speed at which competition is coming at you, but not just speed, the direction from which it's coming as well. So earlier on, it was all about people had efficiency models and they would compete with efficiency models to eat into your market share. Today, they are completely disrupting your business model. So what will disrupt IT services tomorrow? Is it, imagine, is it going to be a company filled with robots, okay, who are going to be doing this? I don't think so. It's going to be part and part. And if you allude to the same McKinsey study that you were alluding to earlier, only about 12–15% of the companies are advanced digital users. There's another maybe 20% or so that is beginning to adopt it. The market is still clear and open for 65 to 70%. Yeah. So as a company, you're sitting and thinking, who is your right customer? Okay? Who's going to be your competition? How are they going to compete with you? And finally, in my business, it's all about what are the kind of people that you're going to get. Okay? So the age-old concept of hiring from the ground up, teaching them a skill. I'm not saying it's going to go away. You may still have to teach them. But the pace at which somebody is expected to reskill themselves has just gone up astronomically.
Yeah.
And that's where things like blockchain come in. That's where things like augmented reality comes in. A lift manufacturing company is going to use augmented reality to train their technicians to be able to troubleshoot whether an elevator works or not much faster. An industrial goods company which is embedding in IoT within their devices are fundamentally going to be training their technicians to read data and read data faster than the others. So the biggest thing is, how is technology going to disrupt your business? Not just technology. Who is going to disrupt your business? And what is the component of technology in it is what keeps me up at night.
Wonderful. I think, one of the measures that I use to think about whether a discussion has been successful is about how many times the participants would have cross-referenced each other. And I think we had that in ample measure today. So it's a very good discussion to have had today rather than, multiple monologues happening, which is something that we try and avoid. It's been an absolutely phenomenal discussion. I would now invite Vikrant to give his vote of thanks.
Firstly, thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to have this dialogue. And thank you, Allocation Economic Times team, to be able to gather this group. These are the opportunities where we do this customer listening in a very different color, rather than a color of requirements, but a color of really what is the thought chain that is on the table. So thank you for this invigorating discussion. And